Hello and welcome yet again to the Beyond the Shallows podcast. My name is Jason, so glad to hang out with you today. Today's going to be a short little topical thing about the culture of your home. Now, I assume that most of you listening to this have some type of authority in your house, are leading children, are parents, or are thinking towards that. And so what I want to do today is encourage you on how you can develop a culture inside your house that is intentional and moving forward and producing the things that you want out of your home. Because our homes do produce things, right? At least a healthy home should produce healthy things for its church, for its community, for the involvement in the world, right? And really, if we can have a strong home structure, it should have a trickle out effect to be really beneficial for the rest of our lives and our culture. And so, that's what we want to do. We want to make sure we're intentional with the culture that we're producing inside our home, because here's the thing: if you are unintentional with your home culture, it will not be healthy. And so we want to make sure we have a healthy home culture. Now, before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about youthworshiptraining.com. That is the website that I run, where I train up students to become lead worshipers and to be intentional about leading the church and through worship and music. And it is a cultural thing. What I want to do is I want to help young worship leaders be equipped to have an idea of what worship is. It is not just the precursor for the sermon. There's a lot more that goes into leading worship, and I want students to have an ownership over that, a role to play in that, and a sense of purpose in that, and to understand how beautiful it is that God has called his church and called his people to sing to him together, communally, together as a people, congregationally. There's not a lot of religions that do that, right? Our God has commanded us to sing to him congregationally. That's an amazing thing. That is a cultural, a priority for the church. And so that is part of what God is building, is a culture of worship, culture of communal worship together. And so if you want to be a part of establishing that in your church, you need to get your students involved, and that will absolutely transform the way that your church views worship, views leadership inside the church, and views discipleship, because it's a really great way to disciple young people to being involved in worship ministry and leadership inside the church. So check out youthworshiptraining.com for more information on that. And now to the rest of the podcast. Now, culture in your home. That sounds like a kind of like weird, ethereal thing. How do we approach building a culture inside your home? Maybe you've never even considered that your home has a particular culture. Now, a culture is like an unwritten set of rules for how things operate, right? I think that would be a pretty good definition of the word culture. An unspoken set of rules, an expectation for how things are supposed to go in your house, in your life. And so if you are not intentional about culture inside your home, it'll really mess up stuff, And so you really need to make sure that that your culture is winning. Now, there's a great book out there. It's a book for business specifically called Culture Wins. It's written by the president of Vanderbloemen, who they are a company that takes churches that need a senior pastor, and they help match them with a good senior pastor, somebody who's looking for a job. And they're very high-end search engine, basically, for churches, and they really help take care of their clients. But also, Vanderbloemen is one of the best places to work. They win awards regularly for being a place that has a really great work culture. Now, there's not awards for establishing a great home culture, and awards are not the reason why you do something like that. But what they found is that in Vanderbloemen, there's a lot more job satisfaction that comes with having a well-established culture inside of their organization. So you need to be intentional about how you approach the culture of your home. what are the rules, what are the guidelines, what are the expectations that everybody just kind of intuitively knows, intuitively follows, and then what are the consequences if those things are not upheld within the home. And, you see this all the time with young couples who are just married. There's an expectation that when you first get into marriage, there's, the husband brings this preconceived idea of this is how we did family life in my home growing up. These are the traditions that we held. These are the, mom always did the dishes and dad always mowed the lawn, or mom did the laundry but dad did the ironing, like even small things like that. Those are all cultural issues that a young couple needs to work through, right? And the husband and the wife, the new husband and new wife, a lot of marital conflict happens because they haven't talked about what is the culture, what is this new family that they're creating, what are they going to do with all of this culture from their past. What are they going to accept as the rules of the new family, the unspoken rules, and what are they going to reject from what their upbringing experience, and what are they going to bring to the table, and are there new things, right? Sometimes there's really beautiful new things. Now, one of the things that my family did, I'm thinking about the holidays. It was always a priority for my wife that on Christmas morning you went and visited grandparents, right? That was like not even on my radar. And so, our first couple of Christmases, it was like, all right, and then we're going to go see our grandparents. And it's like, oh, what? That seems really weird. Like, why would we do that? Like, Christmas, they can wait till later, and we're going to do Christmas as a family all together, And so we had to like work through that cultural thing. Now, for me, that was not a hill to die on. And so it was just something that I didn't expect, was the time spent with family outside of our home, how we navigated that. She had an expectation for that I just didn't really care how that played out. But it was very clear that it was a different cultural expectation. Now, I want to get to 3 points here about culture inside your home and how you can begin. If you've never really taken stock of this, there's some guidelines to how culture works inside the home that can help you out a lot. And so for the first point is that culture is shaped first by what you allow. Okay? There are some rules that come with establishing a healthy culture. If you allow a particular behavior, if you allow a particular bad habit, then that will become part of the culture of your home. And so it's helpful to start when you're establishing cultural rules inside your home with what do we not want to be, instead of what do we want to be. Like, we'll get there, but let's start with the negative, right? Let's start with we don't want this. We're not a household where drinking happens, right? Or something like that. We're not a household that celebrates Halloween. Those are some pretty normal Southern Christian cultural household rules that some of the people that I know live by those rules. And so it's helpful as a couple, as the leadership of your family, you need to establish what is the no-nos, right? What are the things that we're not going to do first? Because when you get into the weeds of life, and as life happens, and as marriage and as your family dynamics are changing, you'll find that you had expectations of a culture that went unmet because you didn't clearly establish what are the things that you allow and what are the things that you don't allow. And so that can create a lot of conflict inside a marriage. That can create a lot of conflict in yourself personally, because if you don't know where your moral framework is, if you don't know your priorities inside of the family, then it's going to be really hard to establish that culture. But if everybody has an awareness and has had a conversation about this is what we don't do, and this is why we don't do it, then it's going to help a lot, because when those cultural things crop up and people start asking questions about it inside the family or even outside the family, then everybody can be on the same page and everybody understands why you do what you do and why you don't do some of the things that you don't do. Okay, principle number 2, culture decays if ignored. Now, the culture that you establish inside of your family, the initial conversations that you have inside your family about this is who we are, this is what we do, this is what we produce in the community, this is our involvement in our church or spiritual life, this is the things that we hold to, they hold dear to, these are our priorities. You can say that once, and that's great. But if you do not keep it up, if you do not keep bringing back to mind this whole idea that these are the priorities of our household, these are what we are together as a family trying to accomplish inside of the world, inside of our home, inside of the lives of our children, if you don't keep talking about it, it won't happen. And that is the same with a business organization. That is the same with a church. That is the same with your household. That is the same with you as an individual. If you do not keep your priorities in front of yourself a lot, then you lose the vision, you lose the reason behind the why, you lose your why, and suddenly you just coast through life. And your culture is the thing that suffers. Those things that you would normally do naturally, they tend to suffer. And this is super, super true. In that Vanderbloemen book that I talked about, Culture Wins, this is one of the things that they talk about a lot is communication over and over and over to help their company know, hey, you know what? These are the things that we prioritize. You know, one of the things that they talk about in the book is actually, you know, how fast do we as a company return calls? How fast do we pick up calls? Like 1 ring, 2 rings on the phone, you know, and they're talking about that a lot. A church that's doing this very well is Passion City Church. They have kind of like their household rules, and before every meeting, there's 13 or 14 of these rules, and whoever's leading the meeting has to go through one of these priorities for their church. One of those is outdo one another in showing honor, right? One of those is as simple as we make everything ourselves. For Passion City, if you see something that looks like graphic design, they have a graphic designer inside their church that has made that design themselves. That is a priority for them, right? And so it just helps them have an identity, helps them have a standard for how they operate. Okay. Now, number 3, if you are establishing a culture in your home, the third thing that I'm going to tell you is that culture repeats itself. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that what happens inside of your home is going to happen again and again. And if you are intentional about the culture inside your home, if you are intentional about the culture that you are building in your job, in your business, or whatever, it will continue on. Not just like 1 week, the culture of your home is to be athletic and healthy, right? And the next week, the culture of your home is to have movie nights a lot with your family, right? No, that's not what I'm saying. Those are patterns. Those are some priorities, but they aren't part of the culture. If the culture of your home is to be athletic, then you'll eventually get to the point where you won't set your alarm in the morning to wake up to go for a run. It will be the thing that you do because you have established it as part of the culture of your home. If every Friday night you're doing a movie night with your family, you won't have to tell your kids, hey, we're doing a movie night this Friday. They will get the popcorn buckets. They will expect you to pop the popcorn, and they will have already picked out 3 or 4 different options of a movie by Wednesday for your Friday night movie night. Okay, culture repeats itself. It creates expectation, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that this is the thing we do, so therefore this is the thing we do, right? Now, that can be really, really healthy if the culture of your house is that once a week we have a family over and we just love on them. We provide all of the food and we have great conversation and we just meet them where they're at and we try to show them love. If you did that every week, that establishes a culture of your house that has a lot of benefits to it. It helps your kids understand how to do sacrificial, unconditional loving. And there's a lot of benefits to that type of thing. If every week, every evening, you and your entire family are glued to the TV and you never interact with anybody, you're establishing a culture that will repeat itself in that isolating tendency and those isolating attributes, right? Like that's not great. And so this is the one that's a warning. You will either create a culture that's really healthy or you will create a culture that has some really unhealthy patterns that will continue and they will repeat themselves, and you're going to have a hard time readjusting and correcting those cultural things if you have not been intentional with your culture to begin with. Now, that is true again inside a business, that's true inside of a family, that's true inside of your life. So, what is the culture that you are establishing? Have you been intentional with it? What are some ways that you can intentionally grow the culture of your home or your church or your organization, wherever you have influence in this life? What can you do to help change the culture, to be more intentional, and to create a community that looks a little bit more like the kingdom of heaven and not the one on this earth? Let me know what it is that you're doing right now to help bring that kingdom culture down onto this earth and to do it intentionally. I would love to hear what you're doing. All right, that's it for this week. Thank you for tuning into the Beyond the Shallows podcast. Again, my name is Jason, and it has been a joy to hang out with you. And if you have some time, think of somebody, pray for somebody who needs to be in youthworshiptraining.com and send them a link to that website. Appreciate you, and I will see you next week.